Welcome to Game Fondue Reviews. In this video we're going to take a look at San Juan. San Juan is a card game inspired by the critically acclaimed game Puerto Rico. So let's jump right in with a description of the rules, see a few example turns being played, and then I'll be back for some closing remarks. This is San Juan, set up for a 3-player game. To set it up, you deal each player a hand of 4 cards. It's for their eyes only. Alternatively, you can give the first player 5, second player 6, third player 7, and so on. And they just discard down to 4. They get to look at those and pick the ones they want. And all discards in this game are face down. You can do it either way. The indigo plant, one of those goes face up in front of each player in their area, and you lay out the 5 roll cards in the middle. You pick a player to go first, and they get to be the first governor. Other than that, you just shuffle the deck, and you shuffle these little trade markers here, and they're going to form a stack as well. So let's go through how the game works. So on a player's turn, they're going to pick one of these rolls. Once a roll is picked, it can't be picked again that round. And each player, starting with that player in clockwise order, has an opportunity to take that action. But whoever picked it gets a special privilege. The game goes on like this until during the builder phase, somebody puts their 12th building in front of them, in which case the game ends immediately right after that phase. So the whole round doesn't finish. And that's really all there is to it. So let's go through the description of each of the roles. And by the way, all the roles are totally optional. So the first is a builder. So what happens when somebody picks builder is each player in turn order has a chance to build something. And the way you build something is you have the hand of cards here, and you discard that many cards. So this number up here is the cost, and then at the bottom it tells you how many points it's worth. But this means to build this, it costs 3. So I build this, and I discard 3 cards face down, and that card is built. But if I pick the builder, I get to pay 1 less card. That's kind of your benefit of picking the builder. Everybody gets to build, but only you get to pay 1 less. Next is the counselor, and what this does is each player gets to draw 2 cards and keep 1. So they look at 2, discard 1 face down, and keep the other. But your privilege as the counselor is you get to look at 3 extra. So you'll actually get to look at 5 and keep 1 when you pick that. Next is the producer, and each player gets to produce 1 good if they'd like to. And to produce a good, all you do is take it from the top of the deck, put it face down on a production building. There's 2 types of buildings in this game, production buildings and violet buildings are of course violet. As your privilege for picking this, you can actually produce 1 extra good, but only for the person who picked it. And you can never produce a good on a place that already has one. So that brings us to trader. So what happens when the trader is the top one of these is flipped up, and it's going to be the same for all players because remember, everybody takes the action order. We're not going to flip up a new one for each of these players. And it tells you how much each good sells for. So those indigo plants, those blue goods, are going to sell for 1 each. And those brown, those tobaccos, are going to sell for 2. And the different ones kind of have a different level of the market. So when you sell a good, you take it, you put it in the discard pile, and you draw that many cards to your hand. So if you sell that tobacco right now, you would get 2 because that's the market value for it today. So if you pick this, you can sell 1 extra good. Everybody still gets to sell 1, but you can sell an extra. And at the end, this actually goes to the bottom of the stack. This stack is never shuffled, so you can memorize it. And lastly is Prospector, which is a little bit weird if you can see it there. There's no action, so nobody gets to do anything. But if you pick the Prospector, you get to draw 1 card. So it's only a privilege. You get to do that. There's one other important thing I want to discuss, and that is the violet buildings. So there's different violet buildings that will have a phase on them, and during that phase you get a special benefit if you have this built in front of you, even if you didn't pick the roll yourself. But there is one catch with the violet buildings. There's a lot of violet buildings with the same name, but you can only have 1 of each name in your area. So for example, if I've already built this archive and I want to build another archive, I just am unable to do that. But production buildings, you can have as many of the same name as you'd like and build as many as you can. So at the end of the game, at the end of that builder phase, when somebody builds that 12th building, no more turns are taken. And what happens is we add up the value of all the people's buildings, so they all have a victory point value at the bottom. And there's some 6 cost buildings that give you points beyond that. For example, this one gives 2 points for each production building you have, which can be very, very powerful. And there's one other card called the Chapel, which has an ability that takes place during the governor phase. It's the only ability in the game that doesn't take place during the phases here. And what that does is at the beginning of your turn, it gives you the option to lay a card from your hand face down under the chapel each turn. And if you don't have to, but if you choose to do so, at the end of the game, each of those is worth 1 point. So that's another way to score. And whoever goes first does pass around. I do want to point out in a 2-player game, whoever's the governor picks a roll, the other player picks a roll, and the governor gets to pick a 3rd roll before all these rolls go back in the middle and the control switches. So that is one difference because in a 3-4-player game, everybody picks 1 roll, and that's the end of the turn, and the governor will pass clockwise. Before we start a playthrough, there is one more card I want to explain, and that card is the library. And that's because the library is the only card that doesn't take place during a certain phase. It can happen during every single phase, and it's whenever you are the governor. It says it on all phases, and what you do is you get to double your privilege. You get to do the privilege twice. So it only happens when you're picking the role yourself. Not when you're the governor, pardon me, but when you're actually picking the role. So you might be the third player to pick that turn, but it's when you pick it. And the privilege is the thing you get for picking it. So in the case of producer, the privilege is you get to sell one extra, or pardon me, you produce one extra good, so you could produce 2 extra goods. The builder privilege is you pay 1 less, so if you have the library, you could pay 2 less. Prospector, you draw 1 card, now you draw 2. The counselor is very strange because your privilege is actually you get to draw 3 extra cards. So what that means is you get to draw 6 extra cards. So you would draw 8 and keep 1, and then trader, of course, allows you to sell 2 extra instead of 1 extra. But in a 2-player game, there is one special thing about the library that is important to note, and that is because when you're the governor, you get to pick 2 roles in 1 turn before the governor switches, but you can only use the library once per turn. Otherwise, it would just be very, very powerful. So let's get going with this playthrough. Since this player has the governor card, he's going to go first, so he picks 1 role, and he picks the builder. So it's his turn because it goes clockwise from him, and he chooses to build a tobacco store. Normally he has to pay 3, but since he picked the builder, he only has to pay 2 cards, so he takes those 2 cards and he discards them face down. Nobody else gets to see what they are. Now he has this in front of him, so this player has an opportunity to build. He decides he's not going to build it this time, and this player over here also decides he's not in the mood for building right now. So then it goes to this player, and he gets to pick one of the actions. He's actually going to pick Prospector. He just wants to draw a card. Nobody else gets to do anything, so he takes that card to his hand, and of course, nobody else gets to see it. And this player last is a little confused about what he wants to do yet, so he's going to counselor. He's going to hope that with getting to see 5 cards and keep 1, he's going to get something that he'd really like to have, and he gets a library, so he's pretty excited about that. So he's going to put that in his hand, and everybody else gets 2, and they get to keep 1. Now, since everybody's picked a role, the turn is over. So these go to the center, and governor card passes. Now, the first thing a player does is remind everybody about the chapel. You get to do the chapel first, but then he has to check all player hands. If somebody has more than 7 cards in their hand, they have to discard, and you get to do that after the chapel, so you can use it first. And hand limit only applies at the beginning of a turn, not at the end of a turn or any time during. So everybody has 7 or less, so everybody's good to go, and the round begins. So then he starts by picking a role. Welcome back. We're at the end of the game. In this round, this player over here was the governor, so he went first and he picked build, and he built his 12th building, so the game ends right now. We don't finish the rest of this round, even though these 2 players haven't gotten to pick anything. So now the value of all the victory points in the buildings are calculated, plus the chapels, plus the bonuses from the buildings that cost 6. No one has a chapel, so that makes that easy, and otherwise you just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 15, 18, 19. So he has 19 points here, and then he gets 2 points for every production building he has. So that's 21, 23, 25, 27, 29, 31, 33, 35, 37, 39 points. That's a heck of a haul. Now this player over here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 14, 15, 16, 19 points in buildings, and then he gets extra points for each monument he has. And he has a monument, and they're clearly labeled like so, but it's only 4 points, so his score is not quite on par with this player's, and unfortunately neither is this guy, because he's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 13, 15, 18, and then he also has 2 points for each production building, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32.
San Juan is everything I want in a card game. It plays fast, it's easy to teach, and it's fun. All you do in a turn is pick a role, which goes back and forth very quickly, but the role you pick, there's some strategy there, and picking the right thing that helps you the most, but doesn't help your opponent, and there's also understanding the interactions of the cards on the board, not just your own, but what your opponent has, and what they might even be going for. All the effects in the game on the cards are very easy to understand. They're one sentence, and there's no crazy icons or anything like that, so it's especially inviting to new players, which makes it hit the table all the more often. It's still stays well and wears well for players that have played it a few times because there's strategy in the game, and it's a lot of fun. And it's fun to try different combinations of cards and things like that. This is an older version. There's a new version now, a second edition that changes a couple cards and adds a new one. I strongly recommend if you start to get that as opposed to this one. It's the same game, but it's just bigger and better. And it's always nice to play the newest version out there, and that is San Juan. Check it out. Strongly recommend this one to anybody that likes card games.